Do not despise the discipline of the Lord. Most of us here have come to realize that discipline is a good thing. It's what enables us to achieve what we want in life, to be able to persevere after any kind of a goal. When we were younger, or those who are still young, might not have a very positive connotation for that word. After all, you don't associate that too readily with playing video games, do you? But if you want to be a champion video gamer, you realize, even for that, you need discipline. And throughout life, it's reinforced to us over and over again that life is actually harder without discipline, even though the effort of acquiring discipline is itself hard. Without it, life is harder. But to be disciplined by somebody else, now that is different. That's negative. Sounds like punishment. But it's important to make the distinction if we're to really understand our reading from the letter to the Hebrews today. For here we read about discipline from the Lord, and it says, "My son, do not regard lightly the discipline of the Lord." What kind of discipline is this? Let's see how the passage continues. "My son, do not regard lightly the discipline of the Lord. Do not be weary when reproved by him, for the Lord disciplines the one he loves, and rebukes every son whom he receives." So there is no room for punishment here. Actually, in our RSV translation, it does use the word punishment for one of those words for discipline, but it's the same word in the Greek, so the better translation to be consistent is simply discipline. But our connotation for punishment is different. Punishment is not to build up. Punishment sometimes is simply to break down, simply a deterrent, or it's to make somebody an example to other people. Discipline is what enables us to grow. It strengthens us, while punishment can potentially weaken. So the distinction is very, very important here. So in light of this passage, as we'll see, it's all positive. Nothing negative about the Lord's discipline at all. It's important because surely sometimes when things go wrong and it seems to be associated with our own behavior, our own less than perfect behavior, right? It's easy to feel like, all right, God's punishing me. He's mad at me. But no, if you're a child of God, God is not mad at you. I don't know what your situation is. I don't know what you've done. If you are a child of God, he is not mad at you, okay? He only wants to build you up. It's all positive. This does not water anything down. This actually enables us to understand the full force of this passage and his interaction with us. So this might be easy to receive on one level here in theory. It may be less convincing in practice, however. So today, let's take an opportunity for this truth that I've given to you to enter more deeply into our soul so we can truly be built up and embrace God's training for us, training in goodness. So children, by the way, this passage I just quoted for you here from Hebrews is itself a quote from the book of Proverbs. Now, the book of Proverbs was written by a king to his royal sons. And so we understand this context in which this was originally given in Proverbs. It was given to those sons who are going to be entrusted with great responsibility. And the word here is sons. We can understand it now as children, right? More generally, gender neutral. But then, in the ancient Near East, those who were sons had the greatest responsibility. They were the ones who were the heirs. And so for all of us as children who who the Lord invests responsibility to bring forward the kingdom. We are heirs in this sense. It's very important that we have the discipline we need so that we can achieve, so we can move things forward, so we can move the kingdom forward, God's kingdom forward in our context. And so, St. John, by the way, I thought after making an outline for this message today, looking at the readings, I thought, let's see what the church fathers have to say about this. What does St. John Chrysostom have to say about this? And it turns out he seems to be the only church father who's written about this passage in any great length, and he writes about it thoroughly, so I'm going to refer to him a few times today. So St. John Chrysostom says, "You endure discipline," he says, that is the writer to Hebrews, "not for punishment," all right? He's reinforcing that point. "Not for vengeance, nor even for suffering, for its sake alone," okay? "See," he says, from which they suppose they had been deserted of God." That's what we think at times, "From these," he says, "they may be confident that they have not been deserted." Right? So God never lifts his hand from you when you're having trouble. His hand is on you, or there. It's right there. With you, guiding, always. So we know this is true. We also know, by the way, there's no punishment in the Lord's discipline, because earlier in the book of Hebrews, we read, Jesus learned obedience from what he suffered. Suffering here, we think of the cross. We think of just unimaginable suffering sometimes when we hear that word. But on a certain level, we suffer every day because any progress in this fallen world is uphill. And so that connotes a certain level of suffering. Even, for example, if you want to make progress in a particular day, right? You're hungry. You can't just go get a snack every time you're hungry, right? Or else you're going to not be able to follow through. Sometimes you just say, I need to persevere with this. My tummy's grumbling. I'll satisfy that later. That's discipline, right? And that is a certain measure of suffering. But sometimes we have difficulty receiving even that level of discipline, on a natural level. And so, as adopted children, we're no different than Jesus. We're trained by adversity. And so the cross, as this ultimate example, right, proves there is a redemptive purpose in suffering. It is never a dead end. It always leads to a greater purpose. Always in the Lord. But there's a caveat here. If we will allow ourselves to be trained by it. The writer comes back to this towards the end of our passage today. So it's important that we understand all these words to be encouragement. It's all encouragement here today. There's no rebuke for you in these words. This is just to understand the character of the Lord, to receive it so that we can receive everything by him. That'll unfold a little bit more in just a few moments. But for an example, trees that are under adversity, that face wind from the prevailing winds from a certain direction, will typically have stronger roots in the opposite direction of the wind. So the wind is coming from one side, there's a stronger root on the other side. This can be called the guy root. If you think of a tent, you have a guy line for a tent. If there's going to be winds for a tent, you have a line that's anchored into the ground so that the tent won't blow over. In a similar way, that root it can be called a guy root, all right? And so if you, just to use the analogy, the key here is that when you face adversity, to develop those stronger roots so that you can grow higher, okay? It's not in this passage, but just right after this passage in our letter to the Hebrews, the writer follows up by saying, don't let a root of bitterness grow up in you. So that would be a rotten root. That would be a root that's not strong. A root that is just saying, I don't want this, right? That doesn't go deeper into the ground. It doesn't take more nutrients. Don't let that, no. Let there be a guy root instead of a root of bitterness, and you will be complete, whole, lacking nothing. So, understand this, that sometimes we can look at this in a way that the Lord is not so much always sending bad things at you, but not always shielding you from every adversity, so that not only can you be stronger, but you'll also be a better agent of the kingdom to strengthen others in the Lord. Your strength is not just simply a natural ability to endure, but no, strengthening in hope, the expectation that God will bring blessing from your adversity. That's the deep root of hope in you that enables you to encourage others. And so think of a father whose son skins his knee. And when that little boy was 3 years old, he needed to be comforted because he didn't know if that skinned knee would ever get better. I mean, this is horrible. What's happened to me here? But when that child is, say, 7, all right, and the child wants the same response that he got when he was 3, now, what does a father do? Oh, you're fine. Right? But as a father, though, you still care. Actually, you need to withhold yourself. You want to go and care for him. You want to treat him sometimes. Your first response is to treat him like he was 3, but you got to hold back and say, no, if I do that, he's not going to grow. Right? I'm going to stunt his growth. Oh no, you're fine. Okay. And then he realizes a few days later, I was fine. Look, it's getting better. So think of this spiritually, that you do heal. You always heal. And that gives you hope that there will be greater healing when these things happen again in the future. So God lets you develop discipline as he doesn't coddle you in every circumstance. In a similar way, you can think of a good coach or a good teacher versus one that's not so helpful. My father in high school was an all-conference guard, but when he was a freshman, he had a coach that gave them a lot of strong discipline, so to speak. You know, they sign up for football in order to get discipline. That's partly what you sign up for. But this one particular coach was very hard on them, all right? And they hated it. In fact, because of his attitude, his approach, they were developing bitter roots, so to speak. But then they got another coach when he was a sophomore. This coach was expected more of them, but his attitude was different. His attitude was one of love. Somehow it was communicated. They knew that this coach would die for us. So he told me, we would have given our lives for him. We would do anything for him. And of course the team grew better. Yes, he imposed discipline upon them, and they had the guy root, so to speak. They got stronger, and they were successful as a result. So it's important that we see God's character as that second coach, right? He did die for you. Okay, and so that's why we know that he won't give us more than we can handle, as the scriptures say very explicitly. That's true. And so, in light of this, Chrysostom again, some coaches, some fathers, so to speak, did it with a view of what seemed good to them. That is, fulfilling their own pleasures oftentimes, and not always looking to what was expedient, when they impose discipline. But here, he says, that cannot be said of God, for this is not any interest of his own, but only for you, and for your benefit alone. Wholly and solely on our account, for this, he says, is genuine love. But it's painful in the moment. It still will be tomorrow or today. And sometimes, and oftentimes, we'll think this is too much. And the psalmist says, let us not be led by bit and bridle. You know, a horse must be guided with goads and a bridle, forced his head this way and another. And so often, Doesn't God use trials to move our heads to where we needed to go because we're too thick to receive guidance in any other way? I'll often ask, God, do not let me be. Do I need to have trials to make me obey? Please no. Just let me just hear your word and obey without them. But now this is not in our reading. There's some verses were skipped in our bulletin reading, in our lectionary reading today. I'm going to read a few verses from you, just changing the pronoun so it's in the first person, rather the second person. Yes, the first person, God speaking to us, rather than Paul speaking the third person of God. For discipline that you have to endure, I am treating you as sons. For what son is there whom his father does not discipline? If you are left without discipline, in which all have participated, then you are illegitimate children and not sons. Besides this, you have had earthly fathers who disciplined you, and you respected them. Shall you not much more be subject to the Father of spirits and live? For they discipline you for a short time as it seemed best for them, but I discipline you for your good, now listen to this last part, that you may share in my holiness. Wow. He disciplines us so that we can share in his holiness. Holiness, our English word for that, which is true according to the Greek, it means to be made whole, to be made complete, so you could be healed. A wholeness beyond what you could achieve on your own or even from the world apart from God's grace. This is what he's doing for you, raising you up to receive his grace, his goodness that comes from God alone. As Chrysostom says once more, let us consider the righteous. From what cause they all shone brightly forth? Is it not from affliction? So he quotes our gospel passage from today, actually, the narrow way. Why is it a narrow way? Because some will only choose the narrow way. Others will reject it. They don't want it, right? So, for the moment, the writer says, all discipline seems painful rather than pleasant, but later it yields. What does it yield? The peaceful fruit of righteousness for those who have been trained by it, for those who will receive it, the peaceful fruit of righteousness. So, when you see through this lens, then you learn a new pattern of thinking. You know that all that God sends you is for your good. His hand is right there all the time. Even as you're trained by this, you realize as a pattern, even if I don't see the good yet, you know it will come because your knee has been scraped and it's been healed every time. This will be healed as well. And he refers to not just fruit in the singular, but fruits, abundance of fruits. So let's allow that guy root to grow up, not the root of bitterness. Put it down. Let God form it and bear abundant fruits of peace as you are made whole in him.